Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Survivor's Guide to Life podcast. This is number 117, and we have a special guest who's joining us from Zihuatanejo, Mexico, John Sullivan, and we'll say a little bit more about him in a minute. Today we're going to be looking at, and we don't want it to be dry, it's statistics. Statistics about caregiving here in the country, and probably this applies just about everywhere. But it's concerning to us. Some recent articles have come out with some information about how many times caregivers are not paid and what the ramifications that might be.
Well, one of the things too about that is that we know firsthand, because we put together caregiving teams. We've been part of them. We helped my wife before she passed away, but we have seen the toll that it takes to be a caregiver, and the kind of deep, intense commitment it takes for somebody to be a good caregiver.
Yeah.
So we know that this is a real big issue. I think one of the things we're also seeing is the need is increasing astronomically because of the pandemic, also because the baby boomers are coming into their age.
The aging
over 65.
population.
Yeah.
That's right.
And the need is huge, but it's what really astounds me is that how little respect and acknowledgement, such a what I call a high calling. One of our caregivers, Marissa, calls it a very high calling, and yet it's given such little respect and help and support, and it really it needs to change, because these people work so hard and they give of themselves so much, and it's actually a dangerous profession in the sense of what it does to the caregiver's body. Mm-hmm. And we've done a number of training manuals and other shows about how caregivers need to pay attention to the impact of what they're doing on, and the nature of the give and take of helping someone who's so sick or dying. And we know that to be a caregiver, you got to be able to give, and it's a selfless type of giving. For those of us that don't know how to do it, either you learn to do it while you're doing it, or you're going to burn out, or you'll get sick. That's what we've seen. Those are some of the things that happen. Other things happen too. But I also think it can be one of the most fulfilling.
I was going to say that. I know you'll get to it, but just how fulfilling it can be, and how much you receive, even though you give so much of yourself. We know here how much you also receive.
And that's the beauty of it. You can't expect much back from someone who's so ill or they're dying, and you got to attend to them. But in giving selflessly, with love and capability, it's amazing how fulfilling it is, and how it's life-changing.
John is a caregiver and has given very selflessly. You might say just a little bit about his work.
Well, I'll introduce you to John. Is John Sullivan. The reason I like him, because I like boxing, and he used to be a world champion boxer, but that's a long time ago. He is a missionary and a pastor in Zihuatanejo, Mexico, and you have to be there to see it, to see what he and his lovely wife Betty, how they tend to the poor and the sick and the disadvantaged in Zihuatanejo. It's and the orphans. Mm-hmm. John has done an incredible job. Betty has done an incredible job, and it's very moving, because we very rarely see that kind of incredible impoverishment here in the United States. As poor as our areas can be, it's very hard to imagine. But John has devoted his life, as his wife has, to taking care of others, and being very sacrificing and very giving about it. He came up the hard way. He wasn't always like this, but he has been for a long time now. And he's a very good friend of mine, and he's a good friend of the Institute. So he's on the show today. He's visiting, and I'm grateful, because we love having him. And I think to have him speak a little bit and join us in our conversation about what caregiving entails and what it takes. Mm-hmm. So what do you think, my friend? This guy can talk. He's a pastor too.
Yeah.
I've done so many different things in my life, from boxing to a college student to you name it. It's good and bad. What I'm doing now is the most difficult thing I've ever done, but I got a purpose. And it's especially lately in Mexico with the coronavirus, the beaches were shut down for about 9 months, and 50% of the population where I live, people are involved with tourism, and they were hurting. And so we took food packages all over the communities. Most of everybody that we were with ended up with a coronavirus too at the same time. We put that aside. That's part of caregiving. You care about the other people before really what danger we put ourselves in. But my crew down there is phenomenal, strong bunch of people that I'm really proud of.
A team is so important. We've learned that too. When you're giving like selflessly like that, having a team, people who work with you and support you is so important.
And we really have learned and built that concept. We call it Lynns Legacy, but we learned how important it is to support and have a mutually supportive caregiving team. And in fact, as things settle down here and we get over the grief of losing Lynn, we are in our nonprofit going to build new teams to help folks, families in need, which is an enormous...
We can see that from here.
Yeah.
What kind of need? We already know it, but it's getting clearer and clearer, the growing need.
Yeah, and I notice, I look in the paper every day, read editorials in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. There are articles on caregiving every day, and they're all good. Some more enlightening than others. So we know that they wouldn't be putting them in the paper every day if this weren't a growing need. But anyway, we wanted to convey it because I think for number one, we set up these podcasts originally to support caregivers. And we didn't feel we could reach enough of them the way we were doing it because we were at a more
one-on-one,
more individual...
which is good.
We love doing that. But,
Right.
We'll
never stop.
No.
But this was another opportunity.
And that's how this all began. And so now we're at a point where we're seeing the need grow. We're seeing the cost, and I don't mean just financially, although we'll talk about that in a minute, of the price that caregivers pay in giving of themselves. And that they reach a point where they're actually physically begin to break down. And I'm talking about some of the more gifted people as well as those that just do it for a job, because it's taking on so much of that energy. You're in there, you're an empathetic type of person, you're giving, where the other person can't necessarily give back. They're sick, they're dying, they're in terrible shape. But we are absorbing and being with them. Not only are we giving, we're absorbing their energy too.
Their energy, and it's often a distress that you feel, that energy, pain or distress or anything that can be natural for someone who is not well at that time.
Yeah, there's nothing, I mean, of course, but you just mentioned it, you begin to feel what's going on. Well, what we discovered is not all caregivers, in fact, many don't feel the toll that it's taking on them until they really are in trouble.
That's true.
So we've learned to train people and to teach them about self-care, how to pay attention to what that energy is doing in their own bodies and what their energy is becoming. And also to pay attention to the emotions. We've seen more caregivers start off so loving and so giving, and after a period of time, we see them get resentful and bitter and exhausted, and eventually they don't want to do it anymore. Or they begin to not treat the people they take care of. We've seen that too many times. So we know this is a costly, painful calling, and yet it's crucial, and the need for it is growing exponentially. So I think having John here, I can attest, because when I first would go with him to Zihuatanejo, the thing that bothers me about Mexico is you have the wealthy, and 3 minutes away you have people literally dying in the streets. And I'll never forget one of the first times I went with John and Betty, there was actually a lady dying of cancer right in the street. Do you remember her? And she was in terrible pain. And I remember we did everything we could for it, and I didn't feel like I could do much, and we knew how to work with pain. And then we did what we could for her. And then later on, John said she was so grateful for what you did. And I was thinking to myself, I didn't feel like I even made a dent. And he says, you did, because nobody is there to help these people. And she just lied there. I think that John said she just stayed there until she died. Am I right?
Yeah. Until
she died. I was appalled. Yeah. But that was only the beginning of my visits to Zihuatanejo. We've had many others, and it's an abomination of what these people go through. So John and Betty are in the midst of it for years now.
And they've sustained themselves somehow.
They sustain themselves. They're spiritually very enriched people who are very devoted to God and serving Him and following the purpose and calling upon their life. So they turn to the Lord. I think He's one of the, we know a lot of spiritual people. We know a lot of religious people. We are ourselves spiritually very strong. But John's got a much more, when he's with us, it's so sincere and genuine, and the integrity and solidness of it is, I don't know too many people that are like he and Betty. And it's very touching because they have to live it. And if they don't, they're not going to make it. It's that serious. So to have him here and have him on the show today is so relevant and important. We love him. I love him like a brother. And I'm so glad that he's here. And that's nice. He actually drove up here before Lynn passed away, and he prayed with her. And I know how much that meant to Lynn. Yeah. And his wife was on the phone from Mexico praying with Lynn too. Yeah. It was some of the most touching moments. And I know how much it meant to Lynn because she loved him. So he's a pretty important guy. We're glad to have him up here.
Yeah. And
we're talking to these folks today because we want them to realize we understand more and more how important this is and what a high priority issue this is. So anyway, this is what the show's about today. I did read a couple of papers. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Don't worry about it.
More papers. We found more papers.
I don't do good like that anyway. Yep. But I wanted to read about some of the things that are coming up. AARP has done a lot of studies, but some of the statistics are mind-blowing.
They are. They're worth mentioning.
Yeah. There are, what is it? There are 4.6 million paid professional caregivers.
Paid direct care workers.
Now, unpaid family member and caregivers are something like 42 million.
10 times more people
and growing
are not paid for direct care.
And the unpaid bill really is $470 billion a year.
Yeah.
That is the most astounding thing. These people, and we know, in fact, we had some of our volunteers, they wouldn't let us pay them. They work for, these folks and loved ones and good people in the community work for nothing. So you're seeing that, and there's very little government support and acknowledgement for these needs. And there's a lot of campaigning and lobbying these days.
There are some things in the works, legislation that could be voted in, but I think they're only just starting to really comprehend how big this is going to be.
Yeah, and I think that, I'm not political here, personally, it's not where I am, but this article says President Biden has called upon for a major investment in the caregiving economy. And they've been talking about the legislation, which I don't think has come into
it hasn't come to a vote yet, no.
But there's a few things. One is called Under the Better Care, Better Jobs Act, would give more money for Medicaid funding for caregivers to improve the access and quality of home-based care, increasing wages and benefits for direct care workers, improving training standards, which we provide a lot of training,
Yes.
Easing access to respite care, that is self-care. That's it's so important. And then there's another one called the Social Security Caregivers Credit Act, would be provides retirement compensation for those people who leave their jobs to look after family members. I can attest to how difficult it is. I did both, and frankly, I know myself that I'm capable of doing a lot, but I know most people couldn't pull it off.
No, and you had a team, and not every family can put together a team.
No, I had six team members, and I was thinking, now how did I pull that off? Well, I know how to do business, and I would raise money. If I didn't have it, we would find ways to raise money to pay. But fortunately, over an extended period, or 5 years, I was able to cover it most of the time. That was a lot of caregivers. Most people we find can't even afford one.
No.
So we've changed our nonprofit to not just for the caregiving teams for veterans, but for all caregivers. And we're actually raising money and looking to raise more money now to help these families that can't afford caregivers, and help with training, help with mental and emotional care and physical care. We know it's important. We also know how expensive it is.
Yeah, we do.
Once we decided to change that particular part of our nonprofit, we were tapped out financially in less than 4 months,
Very quickly.
helping family members,
Very quickly.
helping families.
Yeah.
So we know it's very expensive and that the need is really great. There's another one called the Credit for Caring Act, which would provide federal tax credits for eligible family care members. Then there's another one called American Families Plan, which would give 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave. All of these things, to me, tell you how important this is and how shabbily the caregiving community and profession has been treated, especially in this country. I know that other countries don't pay well, but I'll tell you one thing. There's an emphasis on the quality of being a caregiver from many cultures. We've seen this. From the time they're kids, they know how to deal with the elderly, the sick, the dying. It's an amazing thing. I don't think the United States has that built into its culture.
I was just going to check with John because I know, at least traditionally, there was more of an emphasis in Mexican families for caring for the generations. Has that been your experience?
It is, but there's so much poverty out there right now. The caregivers, they live with almost nothing.
Yeah.
My team, most of my team doesn't get nothing. We try to help them out the best we can, but they're there. They're helping their own people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But still, then we got people coming in all the time that come to our English-speaking church that get involved with us, and so I'm trying to do the same thing. I'm trying to raise money for our caregivers.
What
just
about,
so
like,
they can survive, you know?
What about, like, children? Are children taught in the home to respect and care for, like, grandparents and help out with things like that?
I don't want to come against the culture of Mexico. It's something I'm probably never going to completely understand. I know in our Christian churches, though, the people are really involved with their kids, really care about them. Outside of that, it seems like it's just, they're just trying to exist.
It's
Yes.
just too much just to try to exist.
Just to exist is
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
and
We have seen in other cultures, not just we had some Mexican caregivers
We
that
did.
are angels that work with us.
Very
We've
sweet.
had them from Fiji's, but what we see is their culture has a certain understanding about caregiving that they don't have a look down upon it. It's part of their life because there's so many people that need it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's right. Most of them are at impoverishment levels.
Yeah.
We find here in the United States, if you really look at it, a lot of the caregivers get paid so little or not enough they're on subsistence level.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen so much of that here in the United States as well.
And we've seen it too.
Yeah, there needs to be the shabby treatment of caregivers has got to change. They deserve our highest respect.
Right.
We know that. We feel that way.
We do.
And training, which we've set up. We have training for them, and we've gone to agencies, which is a mistake, because we find that the agencies charge a family a lot of money, but the caregiver who does the work
Caregivers themselves
get very little
get,
of
like,
that.
minimum wage. Yeah.
And when we asked about it, we weren't told the truth a number of times, and then we asked the caregivers, and it was quite a discrepancy.
Yeah.
But the agencies charge quite a bit.
So the models that exist are not going to really, we don't see that they're really going to work for where we are and where we're going. Some changes are going to need to be made.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to mention we have just a few more minutes, and so what do we want to really leave with the people listening today? What is important for them? What can they be thinking about and doing if they find themselves in this situation, or if they have a heart for it?
Well, I tell you what, a lot of us are going to find ourselves in that situation, either needing it. I know I have a very close friend from early sports days, just had a stroke several weeks ago. We all can find ourselves either needing it or having to give it. I think one of the fantasies that needs to be taken away is it could never happen to us. That is complete fantasy. It can happen and does happen to almost everybody. Mm-hmm. So we feel that number one, we know that we're going to be, as far as the Institute, as far as a nonprofit, and as far as this podcast, that we are going to be out there doing everything we can to support caregivers, and also to improve the quality of what caregivers can do, and for their longevity.
Their longevity.
So we're very committed for that. We want people to know they're not alone, and that we have the highest regard for caregivers and what they go through and what they sacrifice. I also know from personal experience how costly and pain and emotional woundedness and grief that we've seen them. We help caregivers. We are those ourselves. We know the cost of doing this in more ways than one. So we're doing this today because we want to acknowledge how important this is with the pandemic in our face again, and the changes that's brought in the last couple of years. We know that this thing cannot be ignored, and we want to make sure that we do something. I think in Japan they have the oldest population. They call it
very aging. Yes.
Yes, and I'll tell you what they call it
It was
because
a
I
little
can
funny,
tell you.
but
Yeah.
not really.
Let's see. It's called Kaigo Jikokuku. It's called caregiving hell.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something. That's what it can feel like
It
at
can be
times.
that.
Yeah, it's a terribly hard thing to do. With our teams, one of the beauties was we could support each other,
Right.
and we did,
And we kept an eye out for each other.
and we did, and it
Yeah.
worked so beautifully. And so, in my case, my wife was the receptor of the most wonderful care to her last breath, and that's the way I wanted it. But so did everybody on our team.
Yeah,
They were so today we're very close as a team.
we are.
And even though Lynn is gone, we have dinner together. We make sure that, and we expect in the future to continue doing this work for other people. So that's what we want this podcast to convey. We are going to be working on this. We understand your plight, and please be in touch with us because we'll do all we can to support you and help you. And we understand the toll that it takes, and we want you to do this before you burn out.
Yes.
Because once you burn out, you won't do this anymore. Emotional drain is one thing, but burning out, it's almost like a lost cause. So we want to do this to prevent that. So there's a longevity factor in all of this, and that all the folks that need caregiving receive the best quality of loving, sacrificing care that's out there.
I do want to thank you, and I want to thank John too, and I consider John part of our team here.
He is.
We always appreciate having him here with us, and so thank you for being here, John. Thank you.
He's a gift to us.
He is.
Yeah.
The Survivor's Guide to Life podcast is sponsored by Sonoma Coast Trauma Treatment, a 501c3 charity, and their website is sctraumatreatment.org. Please consider donating to help keep us on the air. Our podcast is on all of the outlets, and we have our own YouTube channel. We also have Facebook and Instagram pages. Please like and share. Peter and I can be reached at 707-781-3335 or Jenny at bernsteininstitute.com. Thank you, and please join us again next time.
And hang in there. Keep the faith.